On the second day of April, in the year 2021, the humid air of South Beach, Miami, shimmered with a deceptive promise. It was the apex of spring break, a chaotic, sun-drenched carnival of youth and fleeting freedom. Ocean Drive pulsed with a rhythm that was both intoxicating and disorienting, a bass line thrumming beneath the very pavement. From every open-air bar, a cacophony of pop music and shouted laughter spilled onto the sidewalks, mingling with the thick, cloying scents of salt, sunscreen, cheap cologne, and the sickly sweet residue of spilled alcohol. The crowds, a vibrant, transient tapestry of young bodies clad in the brightest, skimpiest fashions, flowed in and out of establishments like Mango's Tropical Cafe, their exuberance a collective denial of consequence. This was a place crafted for illusion, where the very idea of danger felt impossibly distant, a whispered fiction beneath the neon glow. But beneath the glittering surface, unseen shadows always lurk, waiting with chilling patience. This is the story of how that illusion shattered for Melissa Torres, and one 8-year-old freshman whose exhilarating escape to paradise would transform, within 68 harrowing hours, into an unimaginable nightmare. Melissa had arrived in Miami with a quiet anticipation, a carefully contained excitement that belied the boisterous energy of her roommates. She was an engineering student, practical and analytical by nature, her dark, thick hair often pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, her sharp, brown eyes constantly taking in the world, dissecting its complexities. From Tampa, she had come seeking a temporary reprieve from the relentless demands of calculus and thermodynamics, a chance to shed the responsible one label, if only for a few days. She yearned for new experiences, for the vibrant, unscripted moments that college life promised. Yet, a crucial, unseen vulnerability accompanied her: type 1 diabetes, an unyielding companion whose management was a silent, daily ritual. Her insulin pump, a small, life-sustaining device, was clipped discreetly to her waistband, an ever-present reminder of the delicate balance her body required. Before Miami, her biggest challenge had been a particularly stubborn problem set. Now, a far more terrifying equation was about to unfold. The first days had been a blur of sun and sand, exactly what she had hoped for. Mornings spent on the beach, the relentless sun warming her skin, the rhythmic crash of waves, a soothing counterpoint to the thumping bass from the distant clubs. Afternoons were for exploring the Art Deco marvels of South Beach, for the casual window shopping, for the easy camaraderie with her roommates. But it was the nights, the electric, uninhibited nights, that truly defined spring break. On the evening of April 2nd, the group decided to embrace the full, sensory overload of Ocean Drive. The air, even after sunset, was thick and warm, smelling of distant frying food and exhaust fumes, underscored by the ever-present saline tang of the ocean. They had started with dinner at a bustling restaurant, the clatter of cutlery and conversations blurring into a pleasant hum. Then, as the light faded and the neon truly began to blaze, they drifted towards Mango's Tropical Cafe, a veritable institution of Miami nightlife. The energy inside was immediate and overwhelming. Latin music, loud and insistent, vibrated through the floorboards, pulling bodies onto the dance floor. The air was thick with the scent of tropical cocktails and perspiration, a humid, intoxicating mix. Melissa, initially a little overwhelmed, soon found herself loosening up. She danced with her friends, laughing easily, the music a physical force moving through her. She had a few drinks, just enough to blur the edges of her usual caution, to quiet the analytical part of her brain that constantly calculated risks and consequences. She felt lighter, freer than she had in months. In the swirling mass of bodies, under the pulsating lights, it became increasingly easy to lose track of time, of direction, and eventually, of each other. The separation was gradual, almost imperceptible. One friend drifted off to the bar, another to the restroom. Melissa, Feeling a little disoriented, perhaps a little too warm, decided to step outside for some cooler air, promising to be right back. The street, even outside the club, was a river of humanity. People flowed past her in both directions, a constant, churning current. She leaned against a palm tree, taking a deep, somewhat unsteady breath, the bass from mangoes still thrumming in her chest. She pulled out her phone, intending to text her friends, but the words swam slightly on the screen. She managed a blurry photo of a street sign, a fragmented image of 23rd Saint, a silent, unwitting breadcrumb dropped into the digital ether. She tapped out a quick, garbled message, something about needing a minute, about being just outside. She tucked the phone back into her small bag, the world around her a dizzying kaleidoscope of color and sound. It was then, in that moment of slight vulnerability, that she was observed. The narrative of her disappearance, initially, was a silent one, told not by witnesses but by the cold, impartial gaze of surveillance cameras. Footage from a nearby establishment, later painstakingly reviewed, would capture her walking unsteadily northward, away from the immediate crush of Ocean Drive. And then, a shadow emerging from the periphery, an unremarkable male figure. He moved with a quiet, almost invisible efficiency, blending into the periphery, a master of observation. Raymond Vance, 34, a man whose presence was as devoid of distinguishing features as his intentions were devoid of humanity. His receding hairline, his average height, his eyes that revealed nothing but a cold, predatory intelligence. These details would only become chillingly significant later. For now, he was just another face in the crowd, a ghost in the background, a silent predator selecting his prey. The camera angle shifted, the light played tricks, but the unmistakable trajectory was set. Melissa, isolated and disoriented, and Vance, patiently, methodically, following. The hours that followed were defined by a stark, terrifying void. Back in their shared hotel room, Melissa's roommates began to feel the first tremors of unease. Initially, it was dismissed. "She's probably just found someone to talk to," one offered, accustomed to the transient connections of spring break. "She'll be back when she's ready." But as the pre-dawn light began to filter through the blinds, painting the room in tired grays, the excuses wore thin. Melissa wasn't the type to simply disappear. Her bed remained untouched. Her phone went straight to voicemail. The quiet determination that usually characterized her was replaced by an unsettling, profound absence. The growing concern morphed into genuine alarm as the sun climbed higher, bathing Miami in a new, relentless heat. Her roommates tried calling again, then texting, their messages growing increasingly frantic. They checked the lobby, the pool area, even retraced their steps along Ocean Drive, their initial carefree excitement replaced by a gnawing dread. The bustling energy of the morning, once so inviting, now felt indifferent, even hostile. They approached the hotel staff, then, with trembling voices, the local authorities. The response from the Miami Beach Police Department was a cold splash of reality. Detective Elena Rodriguez, a woman carved from the city itself, sharp, resilient, accustomed to the transient dramas of spring break, listened with a practiced, weary patience. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, her expression a careful blend of cynicism and professional detachment. She had seen it all: lost phones, drunken brawls, and far too often, missing persons who eventually resurface, hungover and apologetic. This initial skepticism was a professional defense mechanism, one born of experience. "Girls go missing all the time during spring break," she stated, her voice even, almost bored. "They often just need to sleep it off. Or they've gone off with someone and lost track of time. We'll file a report, but there's a 24-hour waiting period for adults. It's standard procedure." The bureaucratic dismissal felt like a slap in the face. Their desperate pleas were met with statistics, with protocols, with an institutional indifference that utterly failed to grasp the unique terror unfolding. They tried to explain Melissa's character, her responsibility, the fact that this wasn't like her. They mentioned the diabetes, the insulin pump, the critical medical need that transformed a simple disappearance into something far more dire. But the information seemed to fall on deaf ears, swallowed by the sheer volume of similar reports that flooded the precinct during this frenetic season. For the police, Melissa Torres was just another statistic, another transient drama in a city overflowing with them. But she was not, and the waiting period, a mere formality in countless other cases, was a death sentence ticking down for Melissa. The audience, now privy to the chilling reality hidden from her friends and the authorities, is left with the ominous weight of dramatic irony. They know what the characters do not. That Melissa Torres was not merely sleeping off a party, nor had she simply lost track of time. She was already trapped, already fighting a battle for survival against a meticulously planned act of human cruelty, her body a ticking clock within the silent, suffocating cold. The vibrant, pulsating heart of Miami Beach, once a beacon of unadulterated joy, had become the unwitting stage for a nightmare of unimaginable proportions, and the countdown had already begun. The bureaucratic dismissal felt like a slap in the face. Their desperate pleas were met with statistics, with protocols, with an institutional indifference that utterly failed to grasp the unique terror unfolding. They tried to explain Melissa's character, her responsibility, the fact that this wasn't like her. They mentioned the diabetes, the insulin pump, the critical medical need that transformed a simple disappearance into something far more dire. But the information seemed to fall on deaf ears, swallowed by the sheer volume of similar reports that flooded the precinct during this frenetic season. For the police, Melissa Torres was just another statistic, another transient drama in a city overflowing with them. But she was not. And the waiting period, a mere formality in countless other cases, was a death sentence ticking down for Melissa. The audience, now privy to the chilling reality hidden from her friends and the authorities, is left with the ominous weight of dramatic irony. They know what the characters do not, that Melissa Torres was not merely sleeping off a party, nor had she simply lost track of time. She was already trapped, already fighting a battle for survival against a meticulously planned act of human cruelty, her body a ticking clock within the silent, suffocating cold. The vibrant, pulsating heart of Miami Beach, once a beacon of unadulterated joy, had become the unwitting stage for a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. And the countdown had already begun. The sun climbed higher, relentless and indifferent, baking the city in its humid glare. For Melissa's roommates, the initial dread had curdled into a cold, hard panic. The police were a dead end, a wall of procedure and disinterest. It was then, in a moment born of desperation and the dawning realization of their helplessness, that they made the call. A call that would rip through the quiet order of a military base, shattering the illusion of a peaceful leave, and ignite a frantic, unstoppable search. Diego Torres, Melissa's older brother, was a Marine. His world was one of structure, of command, of immediate action in the face of crisis. The call, relayed through a chain of increasingly worried relatives, hit him with the force of a physical blow. His sister, missing in the hedonistic chaos of Miami spring break, his immediate, visceral response cut through the generalized anxiety. He didn't need statistics or explanations of typical college behavior. He knew Melissa. He knew her quiet determination, her meticulous planning, and most crucially, he knew about her type 1 diabetes. This was not a party gone awry. This was an emergency, a medical crisis masquerading as a disappearance. Within hours, Diego was on a plane, cutting short his leave, his mind already a whirlwind of contingency plans, his Marine training kicking in with chilling precision. He arrived in Miami not as a brother seeking a lost sibling, but as a man on a mission, his sun-weathered face set in grim determination, his unblinking gaze assessing every detail. The languid indifference of the Miami Beach precinct, which had so easily dismissed his sister's roommates, was about to meet an unyielding force. He stood before Detective Rodriguez, his marine posture rigid, his eyes fixed on hers. He'd barely slept since the call came. "Look, Detective," he stated, his voice low but firm. "I understand spring break. I understand the statistics. But Melissa isn't one of them. She's type 1. Her pump data stopped. She doesn't have her medication. This isn't a party gone wrong. This is an emergency." Rodriguez, her face etched with the weariness of 1,000 prior cases, held his gaze. "Mr. Torres, we're following procedure. We have to rule out other possibilities." Diego shook his head slowly, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "Procedure can wait. My sister can't. If you won't move, I will. And I'll bring every single person I can find with me." The unspoken challenge hung heavy in the sterile air of the precinct. But Diego had more than just conviction. He had information, critical data that would cut through the bureaucratic fog. Melissa, ever the meticulous engineer, had allowed her family access to her insulin pump data, a digital lifeline that transmitted her glucose levels and insulin dosages in real time. It was a safeguard, a constant monitor of her fragile metabolic balance. Now, that data became a crucial, terrifying breadcrumb. The historical readings from her pump painted a stark, undeniable picture. For the first few hours after her last known location, the data showed a rapid, erratic decline in glucose levels, hypoglycemia, the telltale sign of an insulin dose without corresponding food intake, or perhaps a system already under stress. Then, abruptly, chillingly, the transmission ceased entirely. The pump, her life-sustaining device, had gone silent. Its battery, likely drained by the cold, or perhaps intentionally removed, was no longer sending out its vital pulse. This wasn't a girl who had simply lost her phone or decided to extend her vacation. This was a young woman without her medication, her body in active crisis, her life hanging by a thread. The revelation of the pump data, presented by Diego with a calm, military precision that belied his internal anguish, was the turning point. For Detective Rodriguez, the raw numbers cut through the professional skepticism, the erratic readings, the sudden cessation. This was forensic evidence, cold and hard. Her expression shifted, the weariness giving way to a new, grim focus. This was no longer a routine missing person report. This was a critical medical emergency, escalating rapidly into a potential kidnapping. The 24-hour waiting period, previously an immutable barrier, crumbled under the weight of this scientific certainty. Melissa Torres was now a top priority. While law enforcement began to reorient its resources, Diego refused to wait for official channels to fully spool up. He understood the urgency in a way that the civilian world often struggled with. Time was not a luxury. It was the enemy. He moved with a purpose that cut through the languid indifference of the city, leveraging the tools he understood: organization, communication, and the galvanizing power of a shared mission. He turned to social media, not as a casual user, but as a strategic platform. He crafted a clear, concise message, detailing Melissa's condition, her last known whereabouts, and a desperate plea for help. He included her photo, a bright, hopeful image that contrasted starkly with the dark reality of her disappearance. The hashtag number, Bring Melissa Home, was born. The campaign exploded. Diego's military background, his raw, unvarnished plea, and the undeniable terror of a young woman facing a medical crisis in a foreign city resonated deeply. Students, parents, veterans, local residents, the digital call to action spread like wildfire. Within hours, volunteers began to converge, drawn by the urgency and Diego's unyielding determination. He organized them with the efficiency of a field commander, directing search parties to comb specific areas of Ocean Drive, to canvass local businesses, to share Melissa's photo relentlessly. The collective will of hundreds, perhaps thousands, began to form a living, breathing search net across Miami Beach. The city, accustomed to its transient dramas, was now forced to confront a more profound, more unsettling narrative. The rhythmic bass from the clubs, the shouts of revelry, continued, but now overlaid with the image of Melissa's face, a somber counterpoint. It was amidst this digitally fueled storm of concern, in the sprawling, often chaotic landscape of social media, that the accidental, yet pivotal, discovery was made. A young woman, scrolling through her TikTok feed, paused. She'd recorded a short, frenetic video the night Melissa vanished, capturing the vibrant street scene, a fleeting moment of her own spring break abandon. As she watched it again, prompted by the number Bring Melissa Home hashtag, her eyes lingered on the background, on a blurry, almost imperceptible detail. For a split second, in the periphery of her frame, a figure that, in retrospect, looked eerily like Melissa, walking unsteadily, and behind her, looming in the distance, a hulking, derelict structure. The video was immediately shared with Diego, then with Detective Rodriguez. It was grainy, indistinct, a fleeting ghost in the digital ether, but trained eyes, now desperate for any clue, could make out the architectural details, the distinctive silhouette of a building that stood as a monument to forgotten glamour and creeping neglect, the Atlantis Beach Hotel. A hulking, concrete ghost on 23rd Street, just blocks from the neon-drenched spectacle of Ocean Drive. It was a place the city had forgotten, a structure slowly surrendering to the elements, its once grand facade now scarred by peeling paint, shattered windows, and overgrown vegetation. The air around it was stagnant, heavy with the scent of mildew, dust, and something indefinably metallic, like old rust and trapped moisture. Inside, the silence was profound, broken only by the drip of unseen water or the scurry of unseen creatures. It was a place of stark contrasts, the glittering surface of paradise concealing a deep infrastructural rot. Now, this forgotten ruin, this symbol of Miami's hidden decay, became the horrifying focus of the desperate search, the last blurry breadcrumb. The accidental TikTok video had inadvertently narrowed the vast, chaotic expanse of Miami Beach to a single, terrifying locus. The number Bring Melissa Home campaign, fueled by hope and fear, now had a direction. The collective gaze of hundreds, led by Diego's unyielding resolve and Detective Rodriguez's newly focused determination, turned towards the Atlantis Beach Hotel. The countdown continued, but now, a specific, chilling destination was in sight. The Atlantis Beach Hotel, a hulking monument to forgotten dreams, stood silent and skeletal on 23rd Street. Its once grand facade, now scarred by peeling paint and shattered windows, seemed to absorb the vibrant Miami sunlight, reflecting none of the city's electric energy. Overgrown vegetation clawed at its concrete shell, tendrils of green pushing through cracks, slowly reclaiming what man had built. The air around it was stagnant, heavy with the scent of mildew, dust, and something indefinably metallic, like old rust and trapped moisture. It was a place where time had not merely paused, but had actively begun to reverse, dissolving luxury into decay. To this forgotten ruin, the collective will of Miami Beach converged. Diego, his face grim, his marine discipline a taut wire beneath his skin, led the charge. Beside him, Detective Rodriguez, her initial skepticism replaced by a cold, professional determination, directed her officers. But it was not just law enforcement. The number Bring Melissa Home campaign had ignited a firestorm of public concern, and dozens of volunteers, drawn by Diego's raw plea and the terrifying image of a young woman in medical crisis, arrived. They were a diverse army of hope, their flashlights cutting through the humid pre-dawn air, their murmurs a stark contrast to the hotel's profound silence. The main entrance, once a welcoming portal, was now a barricade of splintered plywood and graffiti. Diego, without hesitation, directed a breach. The heavy wood groaned, then splintered with a sharp crack, admitting the search party into the hotel's interior. The shift in atmosphere was immediate and profound. The humid air outside gave way to a chilling, pervasive dampness within. The faint sounds of the waking city vanished, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the crunch of broken glass underfoot and the rhythmic drip of unseen water. Inside, the Atlantis Beach Hotel was a labyrinth of forgotten luxury and creeping dilapidation. The lobby, once a bustling hub, was now a cavernous space where dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of light that pierced through shattered windows. Chandeliers hung broken, their crystals scattered like frozen tears across the debris-strewn floor. Furniture lay overturned, stripped bare, or simply rotted into shapeless mounds. The pervasive smell of mold and decay clung to everything, a suffocating shroud that spoke of years of neglect. Every empty space was a testament to the hotel's long-dead past, a silent echo of lives once lived within its walls. Diego moved with an urgency that bordered on frantic, yet his movements were precise, methodical. He directed volunteers and officers, dividing the floors into sectors, calling out instructions in a voice that cut through the gloom. Check every room, every closet, every crevice. Look for anything disturbed, anything out of place. The search began, a methodical sweep through the hotel's skeletal remains. Flashlight beams cut through the gloom, illuminating peeling wallpaper, stained carpets, and the grotesque shadows cast by broken fixtures. Room after room, corridor after corridor, the teams moved, their hopes battling against the oppressive weight of the hotel's decay. Each empty room brought a fresh wave of despair, a chilling confirmation that Melissa was not there, but also a growing fear of where she might be. The tension mounted with every creaking floorboard, every rustle of unseen creatures. Time, the relentless enemy, continued its unforgiving march. 68 hours had passed since Melissa's disappearance. Her body, without insulin, would be fighting a losing battle against diabetic ketoacidosis, a condition that poisoned the blood, shutting down organs one by one. And if the cold had truly set in, hypothermia would be accelerating her decline. The thought was a constant, icy grip around Diego's heart. As the upper floors yielded nothing but ghosts, the search inevitably turned downwards, the basement. Even in a building already steeped in dread, the descent into the hotel's lower levels felt like plunging into a deeper, more profound darkness. The air grew heavier, colder, thick with the smell of stagnant water, and something metallic, like old machinery slowly rusting into oblivion. The concrete walls wept with moisture, and the narrow corridors felt like arteries leading to the hotel's cold, dead heart. Here, in the subterranean depths, lay the remnants of what was once the Atlantis Beach Hotel's commercial kitchen. It was a macabre spectacle of corroded steel and broken tiles, a vast, disused space where the pervasive cold of defunct refrigeration units seemed to linger. Broken ovens stood like hulking monuments, their doors hanging ajar, revealing rusted interiors. Pots and pans lay scattered, coated in a thick layer of dust and grime. The silence here was different, heavier, a silence that felt less like absence and more like a deliberate, calculated trap. Then, a beam of light from one of the officers' flashlights cut through the gloom. Settling on it, a heavy, industrial walk-in freezer door. It stood out amidst the general decay, a solid, unforgiving rectangle of corroded steel. Its hinges were thick with rust, its handle a testament to years of forgotten use. But it was not merely closed. A crudely bent steel pipe, thick and heavy, had been jammed through the handle, wedging the door shut from the outside. It was a deliberate act, a calculated seal, a final, horrifying confirmation that someone had not just abandoned this place, but had actively weaponized it. A collective gasp, a guttural sound of dawning horror, rippled through the search party. Diego lunged forward, his mind racing, a primal roar tearing at his throat. He threw his weight against the pipe, his marine strength straining against the crude lock. Others joined him, their hands grasping the cold metal, their combined force bending the pipe further. It resisted, groaning with the weight of years of rust and the malevolent intent of its placement. Every second felt like an eternity, every strained muscle a testament to the precious, fleeting moments slipping away. Finally, with a loud, metallic shriek that echoed through the desolate basement, the pipe gave way. It clattered to the floor, a symbol of broken malice. Diego gripped the freezer door handle, his fingers raw, and pulled. The rusted hinges groaned, a sound like a tortured beast, as the heavy door slowly, agonizingly, swung open. A blast of frigid, stagnant air rushed out, carrying with it the smell of old meat, ice, and something faintly acrid. Inside, the darkness was profound, broken only by the harsh beam of a searchlight that pierced the interior. And there, huddled amidst a makeshift nest of moldy cardboard boxes and stained linens, was a form. A small, still form. Melissa. She lay unconscious, her body curled into a fetal position, her skin a ghastly pale, almost blue. Her dark hair was matted, her face etched with the silent scream of endurance. Her fingers, visible against the scratched insulation panel of the freezer wall, were raw and bloody, testament to desperate, futile attempts to claw her way out, to find a weakness in the steel prison. Her breath was shallow, almost imperceptible, a faint mist in the frigid air. She was barely clinging to life. Her survival, against all odds, for 68 hours in the heart of a literal icebox, was an impossible defiance of her dire circumstances. It was a miracle born of sheer will, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. But the discovery of Melissa Torres, barely clinging to life, was not a simple relief. It was the terrifying confirmation of a meticulously planned act of human cruelty, a predatory scheme that had nearly claimed another victim in the glittering, deceptive heart of Miami Beach. The race against time had ended, but a different, far more chilling race was about to begin. The race against time had ended, but a different, far more chilling race was about to begin. Melissa, a spectral figure in the harsh light, was gently, meticulously lifted from the freezer's depths. Her body, stiff and unresponsive, was immediately enveloped in thermal blankets, her fragile pulse a barely perceptible flutter against the urgent touch of the paramedics. The air around her was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the palpable fear that clung to the rescuers. Her eyes, sunken and shadowed, remained closed, her breath a shallow, struggling sigh. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights and frantic medical jargon. Inside, a team worked with desperate precision, attaching monitors, initiating IV fluids, and administering warmth. Melissa's core body temperature was dangerously low, her metabolic processes faltering. The hypothermia was severe, a brutal assault on her young body. But the more insidious threat, the silent killer, was the diabetic ketoacidosis. Without insulin for nearly 3 days, her blood had become a toxic brew of ketones, threatening every organ. Her body, already compromised, was shutting down. At Mount Sinai Medical Center, she was rushed into the intensive care unit. The next hours were a grueling battle for survival, a testament to the doctor's skill and Melissa's own incredible, stubborn will to live. Diego stood vigil outside, his face a mask of exhaustion and raw emotion, the relief of finding her warring with the terror of her precarious state. Detective Rodriguez, her initial skepticism long evaporated, remained nearby, observing the scene with a grim, resolute focus. The discovery had shifted the entire dimension of the case. This was no longer just a missing person. This was attempted murder. As Melissa's condition slowly stabilized, moving from critical to serious, the medical team began a battery of tests. It was standard protocol, a methodical examination of every system, every potential trauma. Then came the results that would shatter the fragile sense of relief and propel the investigation into a far darker realm. Traces of gamma hydroxybutyrate, GHB, were detected in Melissa's system. The date of administration aligned precisely with her disappearance. This was no accident. This was deliberate. A predator had targeted her, drugged her, and left her for dead. The walk-in freezer at the Atlantis Beach Hotel was not a random location. It was a meticulously chosen trap, a calculated weapon in a chillingly methodical scheme. Detective Rodriguez received the news with a hardening of her jaw. Her initial weariness gave way to a cold, professional anger. She immediately dispatched a full forensics team back to the Atlantis, no longer just a search site, but a crime scene of unimaginable cruelty. Every inch of that decaying hotel, every shard of glass, every peeling paint chip, every discarded item was now potential evidence. The subsequent, more thorough search of the Atlantis Beach Hotel began to reveal the truly horrifying scope of the predator's activities. The basement kitchen, in particular, became a grim tableau of discarded lives. Tucked away in various crevices, behind rusted equipment, and beneath layers of debris, the forensics team began to find them, personal effects that did not belong to Melissa. A faded hair clip, intricately beaded, but not hers. A single, delicate gold earring, clearly a woman's. A tattered ID card, bearing a name and a photo of a smiling young woman, not Melissa, from a university in Ohio. A small, distinctive bracelet, its charms tarnished with age and neglect. 4 distinct sets of personal items, from at least 4 other missing women from previous spring breaks. The dates on the ID and the context of the items suggested a horrifying pattern stretching back years. Melissa's case was no longer an isolated incident, a single act of depravity. It was a link in a chain, the latest chapter in a broader, more terrifying mystery that had silently unfolded beneath Miami's glittering facade for far too long. The Atlantis Beach Hotel, a monument to forgotten glamour, was not merely a death trap. It was a graveyard, a silent accomplice to a serial predator. Detective Rodriguez and her team, now working with a grim, focused intensity, cross-referenced the newly found items with cold cases, with missing persons reports from spring breaks past. The connections were undeniable, chilling. 3 unsolved disappearances from 2018, 2019, and 2020 suddenly gained a terrifying context. Raymond Vance had been preying on vulnerable young women for years, using the city's decaying infrastructure as his hunting ground, his personal tomb. The focus of the investigation sharpened. They knew the location, they knew the method, they knew the target profile. Now, they needed the perpetrator. The existing surveillance footage, which had initially been dismissed as too blurry or inconclusive, was re-examined with cutting-edge enhancement technology. Every camera from Ocean Drive, every ATM, every store entrance within a half-mile radius of the Atlantis Hotel was meticulously scrutinized. The breakthrough, when it came, was subtle but undeniable. Enhanced security footage from a liquor store 3 blocks from the Atlantis, captured in the early hours of April 3rd, showed Melissa, unsteady and clearly disoriented, being led down a darkened side street. But this time, the figure behind her, the one previously just a shadow, was clearer. He was of average height, with a receding hairline, wearing a generic, dark blue maintenance uniform. His face, though partially obscured by shadow, was finally discernible. He moved with a quiet, almost invisible efficiency, a ghost blending into the periphery. A maintenance uniform. The detail resonated with Rodriguez. Who would have such intimate knowledge of an abandoned hotel, its hidden service tunnels, its defunct systems? Who could so easily secure a walk-in freezer with a steel pipe, a tool of the trade? The search parameters narrowed. They began to look for individuals with access to such uniforms, with backgrounds in hotel maintenance, especially those with knowledge of the Atlantis or similar derelict properties. The search led them quickly to Raymond Vance, a name that surfaced in their databases with a history of disciplinary issues. He was 34 years old, a former maintenance supervisor from a luxury hotel just blocks from the Atlantis. He had been fired 2 years prior for insubordination and suspected petty theft, but during his employment, he had possessed full access to various service areas, including abandoned properties that the hotel chain still technically owned or managed. He knew the blueprints, the hidden passages, the forgotten spaces. He was a master of observation, a quiet architect of terror. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. Raymond Vance was not a man of grand gestures or overt aggression. His evil was insidious, methodical, chillingly patient. He weaponized vulnerability, stalking intoxicated young women like a hunter. He used the chaos of spring break, the transient nature of the victims, and the perceived anonymity of the city to cover his tracks. An arrest warrant was swiftly issued. Raymond Vance was apprehended at his modest apartment in a quiet residential area of South Miami, offering no resistance, his face impassive, revealing nothing but a cold, predatory intelligence. He was unremarkable in appearance, exactly as the surveillance footage had suggested, the banality of his presence in stark contrast to the monstrous acts he had committed. His apartment, surprisingly neat and devoid of any overt signs of depravity, held the final, damning piece of evidence. Tucked away in a locked drawer beneath a pile of seemingly innocent technical manuals was his laptop. Forensic technicians, working quickly, cracked its encryption. What they found inside painted a horrifying portrait of a methodical predator. Folders meticulously organized by date, videos of him stalking intoxicated women in the crowded streets of South Beach, his camera discreetly positioned, photos of the Atlantis Beach Hotel's interior, documenting its decay, noting potential hiding places, the exact dimensions of the walk-in freezer, a chilling log detailing the movements of various women, their vulnerabilities, their patterns of intoxication. It was a digital archive of his hunt, a perverse trophy room. The sheer calculation, the meticulous planning, the utter lack of empathy displayed in those files was a sickening testament to a mind warped by control and calculated cruelty. The smiling faces of 3 women, those whose personal items had been found in the Atlantis, stared back from his screen, their lives tragically cut short by the quiet man in the maintenance uniform. Raymond Vance, the ghost in the background, was now unmasked. The glittering surface of Miami Beach, a city designed for illusion, had for too long concealed a deep infrastructural rot, a human monster who silently, patiently waited to consume. Melissa Torres, against all odds, had survived his calculated cruelty, but the scars of his shadow would forever be etched upon her and upon the vibrant city that had nearly allowed him to vanish into its unseen depths. The investigation had turned into a full-scale reckoning, not just with a single predator, but with the institutional failures that had allowed such a danger to persist. Melissa Torres had defied the odds, but survival was only the first brutal step on an agonizingly long road. Her 3 weeks in intensive care were a blur of beeping machines, hushed voices, and the persistent, bone-deep ache of a body pushed to its absolute limit. Severe hypothermia had ravaged her systems, diabetic ketoacidosis had threatened to shut her down entirely, and the insidious presence of GHB had left her disoriented, fragmented. When she finally emerged from the critical phase, the physical scars were slowly beginning to fade, but the invisible wounds, the psychological trauma of 68 hours in a freezing tomb, of the calculated cruelty that had placed her there, would take far longer to heal. Months of therapy followed, a slow, painstaking process of piecing together fragmented memories, confronting the terror, and reclaiming a sense of safety in a world that had suddenly revealed its darkest corners. Yet, even in the depths of her recovery, Melissa's quiet determination, the same drive that had propelled her through demanding engineering studies, began to reassert itself. She understood, with a clarity that transcended her youth, that her survival carried a profound responsibility. Raymond Vance had attempted to erase her, to silence her, to add her to his chilling collection of forgotten victims. But she was not forgotten. She was alive. And her voice, though still fragile, would become the instrument of his undoing. It was a courageous decision, born not of vengeance, but of a steely resolve for justice. Melissa would testify. Raymond Vance's trial unfolded with a grim inevitability in the Miami-Dade County Courthouse. The evidence against him was overwhelming, a meticulously constructed edifice of digital forensics, eyewitness accounts, and the chilling physical remnants found within the Atlantis Beach Hotel. The prosecution painted a horrifying portrait of a methodical predator, a man who had weaponized his intimate knowledge of the city's forgotten spaces, using the chaotic anonymity of spring break as his hunting ground. The silent surveillance footage, enhanced and undeniable, showed Vance impassive and calculating, stalking his prey. His laptop, a digital archive of his perverse hunt, laid bare the chilling extent of his planning, his warped sense of control. Melissa's testimony was the emotional anchor of the trial. Pale but resolute, she recounted the fragmented memories of that night. The drinks, the disorienting heat, the sudden, terrifying shift in her perception, the last blurry image of a street sign, a desperate, unwitting clue. Then, the darkness, the crushing cold, the raw desperation of trying to claw her way through insulation, the rhythmic thrum of the freezer compressor, a constant, mocking reminder of her slow demise. Her voice, though low, carried the weight of her ordeal, silencing the courtroom, forcing everyone to confront the true horror of Vance's actions. But Melissa was not alone in confronting him. Her case, a beacon piercing through years of shadowed disappearances, had brought forth others. 2 additional victims, women whose harrowing experiences had previously been dismissed, or whose memories were too fragmented to lead to an arrest, now came forward. One, a young woman from Georgia, had been found unconscious on a loading dock near the Atlantis in 2019, suffering from hypothermia and a similar chemical signature in her system. The other, a student from Texas, had escaped Vance's clutches in 2020 after fighting back, her screams drawing the attention of a passerby. But Vance had vanished into the labyrinthine alleys of South Beach before police arrived. Their testimonies, detailing similar patterns of abduction and assault, solidified the prosecution's case, transforming Raymond Vance from a single-incident predator into a serial offender, a monster who had quietly terrorized Miami for years. The 3 unsolved disappearances from previous spring breaks, whose personal items had been found in the Atlantis, were confirmed as his victims, their stories finally given a voice through the meticulous work of Detective Rodriguez and the undeniable courage of Melissa and the other survivors. The jury, after just 3 hours of deliberation, returned with a verdict that was both swift and unequivocal, guilty on all counts, including attempted murder, kidnapping, and multiple sexual assaults. Raymond Vance, maintaining his impassive, unremarkable demeanor until the very end, was sentenced to life without parole, his reign of calculated cruelty definitively brought to an end. The justice, though hard-won, carried a profound resonance, a testament to the power of one girl's impossible survival to shatter a long-held silence. The impact of Melissa Torres's ordeal rippled far beyond the courtroom. Her case became a catalyst, forcing a long-overdue reckoning with the vulnerabilities inherent in the spring break phenomenon and the decaying infrastructure that silently enabled such dangers. The city of Miami Beach, stung by the revelation of a serial predator operating in plain sight, responded with unprecedented urgency. Operation Spring Shield was launched, a multi-agency task force dedicated to enhancing tourist safety. Abandoned buildings across the city, once neglected monuments to forgotten glamour, were subjected to mandatory, rigorous security sweeps. Their access points secured, their hidden dangers identified and mitigated. Emergency beacons, small, trackable devices, were distributed to young visitors, offering a direct, verifiable link to law enforcement. Perhaps the most significant change was the establishment of the Melissa Alert System, recognizing the critical delay in missing persons cases, especially for individuals with urgent medical conditions. This new protocol bypassed traditional waiting periods. If a missing person was reported with a known medical vulnerability, particularly one requiring immediate medication, a citywide alert was issued and a full-scale search initiated within 2 hours, a direct and lasting legacy of Melissa's near-fatal wait. The system, a testament to the fact that procedure could no longer overshadow the immediate human cost, fundamentally changed how Miami Beach responded to its most vulnerable visitors. For Melissa, the path of healing slowly but irrevocably transformed into a path of purpose. Her engineering textbooks, once her most trusted companions, were replaced by legal tomes. She switched her major to criminal justice, her sharp, analytical mind now focused on understanding the mechanisms of crime, the intricacies of justice, and the systemic failures that allowed predators to thrive. She began an internship with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Persons, her lived experience lending an unparalleled depth to her work, her quiet strength transforming into a powerful, unwavering voice for change. She became an advocate, speaking at conferences, sharing her story, not for personal gain, but to ensure that no other young woman would endure the same terror. She was a survivor, yes, but more profoundly, she was a sentinel, dedicated to preventing future nightmares. The Atlantis Beach Hotel, the hulking, concrete ghost on 23rd Street, the silent accomplice to so much horror, could not remain. In August 2021, just months after Melissa's rescue, demolition crews moved in. The once grand structure, where Raymond Vance had orchestrated his calculated cruelty, was systematically torn down, reduced to dust and debris. It was a symbolic act, a physical erasure of a dark chapter, a declaration that Miami Beach would no longer tolerate such hidden spaces for evil to fester. Melissa Torres' story, a harrowing account of human cruelty and impossible resilience, became a stark reminder that even in the brightest, most celebrated places, unseen shadows can harbor unimaginable evil. Her 68 hours in a walk-in freezer had been a crucible, forging her into a survivor whose quiet strength would forever echo. Her nightmare, a terrifying confirmation of a meticulous act of human cruelty, had ultimately become a beacon of hope and vigilance, a powerful catalyst for lasting change in tourist safety. It served as an enduring testament to the human spirit's capacity to not only endure the unthinkable, but to rise from the ashes of trauma, transforming personal horror into a profound, collective legacy of protection and unwavering justice.